Daniel chapter 11.
Me chapter 11, isn't it?
Yeah, you chapter 11. Let's read verses 1 through 4. Daniel, you want to read those, or you want to read a couple of them?
Also in the first year of Darius, the man, I even stood up to confront him and strengthen him. And now tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up against the realm of Greece. And a mighty king shall arise, he shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken up and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not among his cluster, but according to his dominion, with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these.
Okay. Yeah. In verse 2, how many kings are mentioned?
3.
3 of them?
Actually, no, 4.
It says 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. So there's 4 mentioned there, right? All right. 4 kings. Now, where did the 4th king get his strength? And the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up against all the realm of Greece.
Riches?
He got his through riches, didn't he? If I had to depend on riches for my strength, I wouldn't have none.
Yeah.
No strength.
You would be able to walk.
In verse 3, and the mighty king shall stand up. This another king. What is he going to do?
A rule with great authority.
Yeah, he's going to be a powerful ruler, and he's going to do just what he wants to do, won't he? Whatever that is. And what happens to his kingdom?
It's uprooted.
They done what?
It's uprooted and it's spread toward the 4 winds.
Yeah, divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his prosperity, nor according to his dominion, for his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others besides those. I don't know exactly what all is meant by that, for others besides those, but I think his kingdom gets divided up, and even though he had it for a while, it disperses. Now in verse 5:12, buddy, can you read without your glasses? You don't have to if you don't want to try it. Give 5 a whirl there.
Then the king of the south grows strong with
What?
with one of his princes who will gain over him and obtain domain, and his domain will be great domain indeed.
All right. So this guy is going to he's going to be weak or strong. So now how many kings we got? Up to about 5?
Yeah.
Verse 6 says, and in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. And shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land. But his son shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and him even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but a multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened by it. All right, how many countries involved here?
Part of it.
Well, there's the kingdom of the north and the kingdom of the south, right? Now, in verse 5, the king of the south is weak or strong? You read that, buddy. It's weak or strong? He was strong king. In verse 6, how did they make a treaty? By arrangement in marriage, right? Did the treaty hold up? No, it didn't work. Most of those treaties didn't work. If I agree, it's mostly a short-term deal. You know, I'm giving you this.
One that I guess really worked was the one in Saudi Arabia, because the king there made the different countries where they wouldn't have to go to battle.
Yeah, well, that worked out for a while. Which king broke the agreement, the north or the south? The south?
Yes.
That'd be verse 7, yeah. Now, in verse 8, which king lives longer?
South.
And he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south lives longer. And where did he go? So the king of the south where did he go?
He went back home.
He went back home.
Then his son took over.
Yeah, verse 8 says, what is stirred up? What is his son shall be stirred up? What does that mean? Stirred up.
Yeah, they go to war.
They get mad, don't they? And
Mm-hmm.
they get stirred up, and they actually wind up going to war. But one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then he shall return and be stirred up even to his fortress. What was this king of the south's reaction? This guy is getting madder by the minute. I don't know exactly. This son here he's pretty angry. In that's verse 11. And the king of the south shall be moved with choler. What's that choler? What is that choler? That's the king's wrath. He's really getting mad.
Enraged.
He's enraged. And he shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. Now he's mad at the king of the north, and he's going up there. Now, after he does this, and when he has taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up. Okay, he's killed a bunch of people, and he's taken out a big bunch of country, a big part of the country, and he's the champion king at this stage. So he's on a what high? He's really lifted up. Hi, Joy. And he shall cast down many 10,000s, but he shall not be strengthened. So it didn't make him very. He's exalted himself big time, but he still didn't get much out of that, did he? Now, how many kings are we involved with here so far? We know
6.
at least 6, maybe 8, maybe more than that. I don't know how many of the sons were actually kings. That they were sons of a king. So if when the king died, some of them become kings. Now, let's take a little time out here. That's at the end of verse 12, right? I didn't make copies of all this, but I can make you a copy of this if you want. This is 15 ancient Greek heroes from Plutarch's Lives, wherever that is, off of the internet. It lists Theseus, 1300 BC, Lycurgus, the father of Sparta, about 800 BC. And it lists Solon of Athens, lawmaker of Athens, about 600 BC. And then I inserted Daniel in here. He's not a famous Grecian, ancient Greek guy, but he lived between 600 BC and this 568 BC. Daniel lived in the middle of this. So you have all this history of Greek going on over there, and we're familiar with it, and Daniel is living right in the middle of this. And then right after Aristides the just, and then Priceless, and Nicus. Each one of these, they had special things. This guy here, he was the Olympian. He says he got power by his eloquence and the money embezzled from Athens. So these guys were all underhanded dealing guys, but some of them did really great things, and they're really, and some of the things they did there is still in existence today. The Nicias, the slave of fear. The turning point of the war in Sparta was the disastrous Scythian expedition, eagerly undertaken by the greedy Athenians. The lame king, this one, and then Dion, the savior of Syracuse. But on over here, the next one after, you have the friend of fortune, and then you have somebody we probably all know, Alexander the Great. He come along at 556 to 356 to 323, which would be about 200 years after Daniel, right? So we have all these wars going on in here. Now Daniel is predicting these wars, and he's predicting all this stuff. And so there's 15 of these guys that are leaders in Greece and that sort of thing. But the one I want you to focus on and know is Alexander the Great. What did he do? He was in the history books. I know he studied about him in history. What in the world did Alexander the Great
He
do?
was a troublemaker.
Just a little troublemaker?
Troublemaker. I want a copy of that.
You can have a copy of that, and you can have a copy of this other. Now, so you have Daniel living in the midst of some of this, and he's predicting here. See, this is not wars that's happened, that he's talking about here in these first 12 chapters. They are wars that's going to come. And he's predicting that they will be coming. Now, let's see what. Yeah, Alexander the Great. Turn back over to Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. Now this is a prophetic vision that we looked at, and we read about a king that's going to come. Now, Joey, read verse 7.
After this I kept on beholding in the visions of the night, and see there a fourth beast, fearsome and terrible and unusually strong. And it had teeth of iron, big ones. It was devouring and crushing. And what was left it was treading down with its feet. And it was something different from all the other beasts that were prior to it. And it had 10 horns.
So this 10-horned beast, now we know that from studying Revelation and from all that these beasts are governments. Or in Daniel's day, you was a king, you were the government. And so this is kings and governments is what this is. So this is a pretty terrible beast here. This government, he's meaner and bigger and stronger and everything. Now, I want to read you something about Alexander the Great. The Macedonian king who defeated his Persian colleague Darius III Condomanus. Now, did you remember Darius? We read about Darius, and Darius was a king when Daniel's writing this. This is Darius III down here that the Persian king. So we're a few years down. Now this Macedonian king and conquered the Achaemenid Empire during his campaigns. Now Alexander visited Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Media, Bactria, the Punjab, and the valley of the Indus. In the second half of his reign, he had to find a way to rule his newly conquered countries. Therefore, he made Babylon his capital and introduced the Oriental court ceremonial, which caused great tensions with his Macedonian and Greek officers. A short bio can be found. You have to click on something else. Now, Alexander the Great, he is depicted here in this on a horse. Now, he's a young guy. How old do you think he was? Now, he appeared on the scene 200 years after Daniel. How old was he?
How many years?
How old was he? Yeah. How many years old was he? Was Alexander the Great? Was he 50? 60 years old? Was he 20?
Probably in his 40s.
Probably in his 40s. Now, Alexander the Great was 16 when he began his conquering. And it says here he visited all of these places. Now this article places Alexander the Great, and he had quoted chapter 7, verse 7 here. This article believes that, and I've been inclined to believe this also, that Alexander the Great was this king in verse 7, chapter 7, verse 7 of Daniel. Now,
What does that say there? Are we going to read that?
I just read that. Now, this is a map. Now, this shows the territory that Alexander the Great captured and was king of. This right here, this little strip of land right here, that's where Israel is. Now, Alexander the Great had all this under control. He conquered all of this, all of this, all of this, and all of this. Now, Babylon is where Daniel is. He's been captured. You know, Israel's captured, but they're still captured, and they're in Babylon. And now a lot of the Israelites are still in Israel, but Daniel and his people, they're all under the rule of Babylon. While Daniel is doing his writing of his book, but Alexander the Great, 200 years later, captured Babylon along with all of the other cities and things around there. He was 16 when he began his campaign, and he was 33 when he died. So you know, if you read this over here, and he shall be, you know, in verse 7, chapter 7, verse 7, you know, it says, behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. If you're going to capture that much territory in 15 years of your, you know, from the time you're 16 to the time you're 33, you're going to capture these. And I believe that is this. I believe the prediction in verse 7 is this. Now, let's read 13 through 19, and I believe this is back in Daniel chapter 11, verse 13 through 19. All right, and I think this is a description of that Daniel gave of this beast and of Alexander, but I'm just guessing on the Alexander. But he fits the description of this, and he fits the description of this fierce battle. I mean, if you're going to be a king and you're going to take over, you know, all this huge territory in 15 years of your life, you're going to be a pretty fierce warrior, right? It's not going to be a piece of cake, but So Alexander the Great fits this, and he's the only king or the first king that was referred to as the Great, like Alexander the Great. Now let's read about him. Joy, you want to read down through, what do we got? Through 19? Can you do that?
Yeah, 13 through 19?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the king of the north must return and set up a crowd, larger than the first. And at the end of the times, some years, he will come, doing so with a great military force and with a great deal of goods. And in those times there will be many who will stand up against the king of the south. And the sons of the robbers belonging to the people will for their part. Did I read that right? And the sons of the robbers belonging to the people will for their part be carried along to try making a vision come true. And they will have to stumble. And the king of the north will come and throw up a siege rampart, and actually capture a city with fortifications. And as for the arms of the south, they will not stand, neither the people of his picked ones, and there will be no power to keep standing. And the one coming against him will do according to his will, and there will be no one standing before him. And he will stand in the land of the decoration, and there will be extermination in his hand. And he will set his face to come with the forcefulness of his entire kingdom, and there will be equitable terms with him, and he will act effectively. And as regards the daughter of womankind, it will be granted to him to bring her to ruin. And she will not stand, and she will not continue to be his. And he will turn his face back to the coastlands, and will actually capture many. And a commander will have to make the reproach from him cease for himself, so that his reproach will not be. he will make it turn back upon that one. And he will turn his face back to the fortress of his own land, and he will certainly stumble and fall, and he will not be found.
Okay. That sounds like a pretty mild-mannered guy. That's not very, not a. Does that sound like a, or does that sound like a really fierce warrior guy?
Yeah.
It sounds like a fierce warrior guy to me. He's coming through there when he comes down from the north here and hits the south. He takes over everything. Fortress. You remember. Babylon was a fortified city, but he took all the cities that had walls around them and everything. And so my opinion is that this is a description by Daniel 200 years before it happened, when Alexander the Great invaded and come down through there. Now, what happened to him in verse 19? Then he shall turn his face toward the ford of his own land. He's conquered all this. Now he's looking back to say, okay, now I want to go back up here, and I can probably rule this, but you don't spell that out. But he turns his face toward his homeland. So he's conquered everything, and now he's thinking, okay, I've got all this conquered. Now I've got to rule. But what happened to him? What does it say right after he began to turn his face to his homeland? What happened to him?
He will stumble and fall.
Stumbled and fell and not be found.
What does that mean?
He died.
Oh.
He fell. And that's what happened to him in the history of stuff. He made this huge campaign, conquered all this kind of stuff, and as soon as he got it all conquered, he died. But it doesn't say he was killed. It doesn't say. It just said he stumbled in the Bible. But I don't know how he was. He just no more. Yeah, just but he lived. He lived. He was from 536 to 320. 536 to 323 is how long he lived. His 56. Get the dates right. Is 56, 356, 323, and he lived. So he lived 33 years. If he began his campaign at 16, and he conquered all that in 6. And by the time he is 16, he was busy. he was a warrior deluxe, and that's what that verse 7 in chapter 7 described, and that's what Daniel is saying here. This guy. So Alexander the Great was more than likely and very much could have been and probably was that guy described by Daniel. He's the only one in history that fits that description. Now, verse 20, what happens in verse 20 says, "Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle." So right after this king that conquered all this, what happened there? A new guy.
New guy stands up and wants to tax everybody.
It starts taxing everybody, doesn't it? Now, so
when it says he will be broken, what does that mean? That
but he will be broken.
his kingdom, or he will?
He will. He will be. In days he shall be destroyed. neither in anger nor in battle. He just dies. Now, verse 21. Daniel, you got that one?
Verse 21.
Yeah.
Verse 2.
Okay. Where it means at.
Yes, I know. And in his place shall arise a vile person to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue.
All right, so he's going this. So this guy is a vile person. What is some descriptions of a vile person?
Crude.
Little he any kind of underhanded dealings, or or any of those kind of things. Anything almost is not honorable. If it's not an honorable deal, he'll do it. It's deceitful, and he tell you anything to get you to join him. It says he obtains the kingdom by flatteries. You maintain me as king, I'll give you this, or I'll give you this, or make you big time. And then it says, and with the arms of the flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. This is some more just ebb and flow of kings. And he shall enter peacefully upon the fattest places of the provinces, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil and riches. He's dividing up the kingdom. He's spreading out. He's bribing people and giving people part of the spoil. Like if you do this for me, then you get this much of this. And he's incorporating the spoil to help conquer and do things. And he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. This is after Alexander the Great. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great mighty army, and he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of the meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down. This is, treachery and assassination and just all this stuff going on in the known world around you. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So this guy in verse 21, he gets a kingdom by flatteries and by trickery or whatever he needs to do. He don't take it over by wars. And then in 22 and 23, this with the arms of the flood, he's going to be overtaken, and then another one's going to come along, and it's just one right after the other. Now, verse 24, and verse 20, and 20, 24 now. This guy gets his kingdom anyway, just by trickery, treachery. 25, what's happening here? 25 is he's going against the south, and they're going to have another fight. And then in 26 through 28, this is a full of evil. He has an evil heart. He's mischievous and he lies. Now, and he has a lot of earthly treasures. Now, then shall he return into the land, in verse 28, then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant. Now, where is his heart? Where is his really main goal, his main thought? Against what? The holy covenant. Now, what's the holy covenant? That's the covenant of God with Israel. Now, God gave the covenant of the 10 Commandments and the covenant that God would be with Israel and protect Israel. And this king right here, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall exploit and return to his own land. And that's 28. Now 29, at the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south. So he's going to come back to the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter, for the ships of ch11 shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved, return, and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. So this guy is working against Israel, right? He's working against the holy covenant, made by God through Israel. Now, verse 31 says, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that makes desolate. All right. Now, so these three verses, 29, you can mark them or whatever, but these three verses right here, this king is against working to stop the covenant of God. Now, it's not spelled out, but we know that who had control of Israel when Christ came? The Romans. So you had Alexander the Great back there, but then you have down another 100 years after Alexander the Great or so, in the year of 218 BC, you have this group here that invades. Now, Rome is in Italy, right? At 218 BC, Rome controlled this property. Just Italy, and this is Sicily, I think, the Isle of Sicily. So the Romans in 218, they're beginning to get a little toehold of things. But Daniel said, and at an appointed time of return, things is going to change. Now, this is what Rome had control of when Christ was born. This is AD 14, after death 14. So they had control. They started out with just Italy, but they had control of all of this and all of this. And this little strip of land right there, that is Israel and Judah, right there. And so the Roman Empire had grown in 200 years to everything around the Mediterranean Sea. So that's what I believe these verses right here, these three verses right there is talking about. is this, because the Romans, when they come down and did their capturing of Israel and their capturing of all of those places around, they worked against the covenant of God. And when Christ came, we know that the Roman government actually killed him, but through the tyranny of some of the Jewish people. But they did everything they could to stamp out the covenant of God, the Roman Empire did. And that's what Daniel's predicting right there, in those verses right there. And that's as far down as I worked, was through 31. So we'll start there next week at 32. Now, when you add all that up, Daniel is predicting these things happen. Well, it's really hard to say, just explicitly, this is that event and this is that event. But these two events, the event of Alexander the Great and the event of the Roman Empire working the way they did work, those two events pretty much tell me that Alexander the Great was this government beast in Daniel 7:7, and the way the Roman Empire worked against God and God's covenant tells me that they were the people described in Daniel 29 through 31. So when we look at this, and if you're looking at it through spiritual eyes, not just a history book, and you're looking at it through God's, when earlier in Daniel we talked about that God showing Daniel that he had the future, the Messiah was going to come, and then later the end of time would come. And so you can see how this is all fitting together. He had one big powerful guy made a big surge, and then he has this up here. And when Rome come in, the language had gotten pretty much one of the best languages that could be possible was in place at that time. You had a lot of different languages, but you had one main language, and Latin. Latin is considered one of the best languages ever, and you had that in place through the Romans. So all these happenings of all this stuff gradually led to the time when Christ would come, and it actually kind of created a shield right here, and then through the Romans, Christianity, after Christ was killed and he rose again through that resurrection and the gift of the Holy Spirit, what happened to the Jewish nation? They were under a lot of oppression. They couldn't worship Christ. They dispersed. And when they did, what did they take with them? The message of salvation in Jesus Christ. So you can see kind of what Daniel's talking about, and we can see in history how one event right after the other led up to Christ at a designated point in time, and then began the Christian era. And if you think Christ didn't have an impact before Christ and after Christ, changed the way mankind count time. And that's a pretty good impact if you change the way that mankind counted time. We count time down to Christ and we count time back to Christ. And Christ is the hope of the earth and the hope of the world through faith in Him. We can have salvation and eternal life with God and under God's supervision. So all this stuff connects together, and all of the history books of the earth all connects together, and it's all part of God's plan to bring Christ, provide salvation for man, and then open the gates for all the earth to come through Christ. But he has a plan, just like he had the plan to open it to all the people of earth. He has a plan somewhere down to end all of the sin, corruption, evilness that people have developed in their lives from not staying under God. All the way back from the time of Adam and Eve, when they got out from under the God, it's going to eventually all come to an end. If you can see how he controlled all the way down to Christ, then if he can control that for her, God can control all the way out until the end of time. And so all these events in history are working toward accomplishing the goal, which is to reunite to God all of the people that believe and trust in him, all of his children. He's going to leave all of Satan's children with Satan, throw them in fire. And so all the things we do as humans, there's two places we're going to wind up. One of them is going to be with God and Christ, and the other is going to be with Satan. And whatever happens to Satan, Revelation tells us all that. And whatever happens to Christians, Revelation also tells us all of that. And so our part in it is to choose which way you're going to serve the house of God or serve Satan. That's really the only decision humans make in all of this. And nothing really changes. All this stuff didn't change anything except what it needed to change to bring to a point that God had designated for Christ to come. And the only thing, all these wars, all this stuff we're doing right now is all just going to bring to the battle of the Armageddon. Is what it'll eventually bring it to. Everything that's happening today is going to draw all of mankind into that battle.
You see that deal on TV this weekend about the hell, the gates of hell, the sinners?
No?
They had a deal on TV about that where it showed the realm of hell. That it was people that had a great deal of sin would be punished more than one that didn't. That's the way they had this realm of hell. But if that's the case, man, to me, if you committed the sin, one, you committed them all, so how can they come up with that?
Well, it says all that are not with God will be thrown into the fire of brimstone. So the full end of time, they're all treated the same. They're all thrown into the lake of fire.
There's no difference in the difference of punishments you're going to get. You done one, you get it all.
Yeah. You're either going to be cast in with Satan and his demons, and all of his followers will be all cast into the lake of the brim of fire and destroyed. And in Revelations, and then all of God's saints will be with God and Christ
But I thought that was interesting. What that set out.
I don't think there's different degrees of punishment or different degrees of blessings. It's, we may get different degrees of blessings. Sometimes, one of us may have more of this or more of that, but that may be just earthly looking at blessings and stuff, Spiritual looking at blessings, some of the happiest spiritual people I've ever seen is not always rich, but they're comfortable with God and they have a rich life. May not have money. I'm not talking about a rich life in money, but a rich life in the way they live and the things that happen around them and that sort of thing. They have a rich life. And earthly, we have a tendency to look at riches in money, power, and stuff like that. But in spiritual, it's different. When we look at spiritual blessings, You know, that's when you experience that joy, and nobody writes anything about it. Oh man, you have a joyous feeling well up inside of you. That's a spiritual blessing, you know. And we look at, well, he got $500 for that pig. You know, that's a big kind of dollar price for that pig. He got blessed, you know. That's an earthly blessing, you know. And everything comes from God, but when you get blessed by God, you feel it inside, and you know that you've been blessed by God.